My name is Carol Whitfield, and I'm 56 years old. 4 months before my daughter's wedding, I was standing in my garage sorting through Christmas decorations when my phone buzzed with a text from her. "We've decided Richard should walk me down the aisle.
He's been more of a dad to me lately.
Hope you understand." I read it twice. I set the phone down on the workbench next to a box of ornaments I'd been wrapping in newspaper since Emily was 6 years old. Then I picked the phone back up and read the message a third time, because some sentences don't finish landing until the third pass. I did not call her screaming. I did not drive across town. I finished sorting the ornaments into their bins, each one labeled in my own handwriting, the way I've done every December for 20 years. I carried the last box up to the attic, came back down, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at a mug of tea until it went cold. Then I opened my laptop and logged into an account I had been quietly feeding, without a single soul knowing, for 6 straight years. But the wedding text isn't the real story. What I found out 3 weeks later, about a conversation that happened at a dinner table I was never invited to, that's the part that still makes my hands go still when I try to explain it out loud. To understand why that text hit me the way it did, you have to understand what the last 2 decades of my life actually looked like. I work as a claims adjuster in Peoria, Illinois. It's not a job anyone puts on a vision board, but it's steady, and steady is what raised my daughter after her father walked out when she was 9 years old. He paid child support for 14 months. Then the check stopped, the calls stopped, and eventually even the birthday card stopped. After that, it was just me, a 2-bedroom rental with a leaky bathroom faucet I never had money to fix, and whatever overtime I could pick up during storm season, when the claims came in by the hundreds. Emily was smart in a way that scared me a little, honestly. Smarter than our zip code, smarter than the underfunded schools we could afford. When she got into a state university on a partial academic scholarship, I cried in the parking lot after the campus tour, sitting in my car with the engine off, because I already knew what was coming and I knew I was going to say yes to it anyway. The gap between her scholarship and the real cost of 4 years came out to just over $31,000. Her father wasn't signing anything, obviously, so I took out a Parent Plus loan under my own name. And here's the part one never told her. I let her believe the loan was federal student aid, something standard, something every kid takes out, nothing to think twice about. I didn't want her walking around campus, with guilt sitting on her chest while she was trying to become a nurse. I wanted her to feel free. For 6 years, on the first of every month, $540 left my checking account and went straight to that loan. Quietly. While I drove a car with a check engine light I'd learned to ignore. While I told her I just liked simple things, when she asked why I never took real vacations. While I clipped coupons in a grocery store parking lot like it was a hobby instead of a survival tactic. Emily married young, at 24, to a sweet but overwhelmed guy named Danny. It ended 2 years later, quietly, no cheating, no big blow-up, just 2 kids who'd grown into different people. She moved back near me for a stretch after that, and it was during that time Richard came into the picture, a soft-spoken widower who ran the hardware store on 5th Street, with 2 grown kids of his own from his first marriage. I liked Richard. I want to be honest about that, because this story isn't about hating the man. He was kind to her in a steady, unremarkable way that mattered a lot to someone coming out of a divorce. He and Emily started dating about 18 months before the wedding, and within a few months he'd become a fixture at nearly every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. I didn't mind sharing the table. What I minded, what I'm only now willing to admit I minded, was watching myself slowly shrink out of the family photographs. Last Thanksgiving's picture had Richard standing at the head of the table carving the turkey I had bought, seasoned and cooked myself, starting at 6 that morning. Wedding planning started in early spring. I helped pick the venue, a converted barn 40 minutes outside the city. I paid for the tasting menu out of my own pocket because Emily's new nursing job hadn't kicked in with full benefits yet. I said yes to every dress fitting. I answered every 11 p.m. phone call about centerpieces and seating charts and whether ivory was too close to white. Then, on a Tuesday evening at 6:15, right after a family dinner I hadn't been invited to, the text arrived. "We've decided Richard should walk me down the aisle.
He's been more of a dad to me lately.
Hope you understand."
He's been more of a dad to me lately.
18 months of dating, weighed against 18 years of everything. I stood in that garage holding my phone like it was a hot pan I'd forgotten to use an oven mitt for. I called her that same night. And I'll admit, I did the embarrassing thing before I found the dignified thing. Asked if maybe we could both walk her down together. I offered to walk her halfway and step aside so Richard could finish it. I heard my own voice getting smaller with every offer, the way a price tag gets crossed out again and again at an estate sale nobody's attending. She was gentle the whole time, which somehow made it worse. "It's not that I don't love you, Mom. It's just what feels right for our family now. Our family now." As if I'd been quietly voted out of a family I had built, alone, on a claims adjuster salary, one overtime shift at a time. I didn't push further that night. I told her goodnight, hung up, and sat at my kitchen table doing the thing I always do when something doesn't add up. I went back over the numbers in my head, the way you'd recheck a claim file for something you missed the first time. 3 weeks later, I learned what had actually happened at that dinner, because Richard's future stepdaughter, a chatty 22-year-old named Paige who genuinely didn't know any better, mentioned it to me casually at Emily's bridal shower, like it was nothing. She said Richard had brought it up himself, right there at the table, in front of everyone, and that Emily had gone quiet for a second before agreeing. Emily hadn't decided this on her own. She'd been handed the idea mid-dinner and hadn't pushed back. I stood in that bridal shower, holding a plastic cup of pastel pink punch, wearing the exact smile I've perfected over years of hospital hallways and church potlucks, and underneath that smile, something in my chest went very still and very cold. I drove home that afternoon and opened my laptop. Not the wedding budget spreadsheet, the other account, the loan servicer's portal. The one that had quietly pulled $540 out of my checking account every single month for 6 years, more than $38,000 total, while Emily believed, completely and innocently, that she'd made it through school on scholarships and standard federal aid alone. I sat there in the dark kitchen with the login screen glowing in front of me, and for the first time in 6 years, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. If I'm not her father and apparently not important enough to walk her down an aisle, why am I still the one quietly paying for the education that got her there in the first place? I didn't cancel anything that night. I want to be precise about that because precision matters to me, always has. I closed the laptop and went to bed and lay there a long time listening to the house settle around me, the way it settled around me alone for years. The next morning I called my sister Denise, who lives 2 hours away in Springfield and has never once in her life minced words with me. I told her everything, the loan, the text, the dinner, Paige's slip at the shower. Denise listened without interrupting, which for her is practically a miracle, and when I finished, she said one sentence I've turned over in my head every single day since. "You've been paying rent on a seat nobody ever promised you'd keep." I didn't say anything for a while. Then I told her I didn't know what to do with that. She said, "You don't have to know yet. You just have to stop paying for a chair you've already been told isn't yours." I thought about my own mother that night, who worked 2 jobs to put my brother through college and was still, 30 years later, treated like hired help at every family gathering, expected to cook, expected to clean, never once expected to be honored at the head of anything. I remember thinking, very clearly, I do not want that to be me at 70, still quietly writing checks for a family that seats me at the kids' table and calls it love. I still didn't cancel the loan payment. Not yet. What I did instead, that same week, was book myself a trip. Not spite. Not theater. Just something I had wanted for years and always told myself I couldn't afford because there was always $540 leaving my account first, before anything else got a chance. 10 days on the Amalfi Coast, the kind of trip I'd bookmarked and closed the tab on 100 times over the years. I paid for it out of an account I'd started calling, half as a private joke, my rainy day fund. Except the rainy day had clearly already arrived, and I just hadn't noticed the weather changing. The wedding was 6 weeks out. I kept helping. I kept smiling politely through dress fittings and seating chart arguments. I did not make a scene. But something in me had gone quiet and clear, the way the ocean goes still right before a storm rolls in. 2 weeks before the wedding, the final venue deposit balance came due, and Emily texted asking if I could cover it like we discussed, for $1,000. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back that I'd already given what I could, and that I was heading out of town the following week and might not be easily reachable for a while. I flew to Rome the following Tuesday. I didn't give Emily many details, only that I was traveling. I kept my phone on airplane mode more often than not, which is unlike me, and honestly felt strange the first few days, like holding my breath underwater. I walked the Amalfi Cliffs in a sundress I'd bought specifically for the trip, and a stranger named B, a retired schoolteacher from Leeds traveling alone after losing her husband the year before, took a photo of me standing at a cliffside overlook, the sea behind me a color I genuinely didn't have a name for. I posted it with one line underneath. Some seats you have to build yourself. I want to tell you it felt like triumph. Honestly, it felt more like exhaling after holding my breath for 6 straight years. While I was standing on that cliff, 3 states away, my bank quietly processed the change I'd made 2 days before leaving. I had, in fact, finally called the loan servicer and paused the autopay, not canceled outright, just paused, effective the 1st of the following month, which happened to land 4 days before the wedding. I found out what happened next the way I always find things out in this family, which is that someone can never quite help telling someone else, and eventually it travels back to me. Richard, it turned out, had assumed for years that Emily's education had been covered entirely by scholarships, same as she had believed. When the loan servicer sent an automated notice to the address still on file, mine, flagging a missed payment and an outstanding balance of just over $11,000, Emily called me in a full panic, convinced there'd been some kind of fraud, some mistake, because she genuinely had no idea a Parent Plus loan in my name had existed at all. I answered that call. I want that on the record because part of the honest, unglamorous truth of the story is that even furious, even hurt, I still picked up the phone. I told her the truth, plainly, the same steady way I deliver bad news to families in my line of work when a claim isn't going to go the way they hoped. I told her about the $31,000. About 6 years of $540 a month, quietly, without a single word of it ever reaching her. I told her I'd never mentioned it because I hadn't wanted her carrying guilt on top of nursing school. And I told her I had paused the payment, not out of cruelty, but because I had finally sat down and done the honest arithmetic of it. I had spent 6 years quietly financing a family that, when it came time to choose who stood beside her for the most symbolic walk of her life, chose someone she'd known for 18 months. She went quiet on the phone for a long time. Then she said the sentence I've replayed more than any other in this entire ordeal. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know. I believe her. That's the complicated part one won't smooth over for the sake of a tidy ending. I believe she genuinely didn't know, and I also believe that not knowing doesn't erase 6 years, and it doesn't erase how easily she agreed at that dinner table when Richard's suggestion floated across the mashed potatoes like it cost nothing at all. The wedding happened 4 days after that phone call. I did attend. I sat in the second row, not the first, though Emily herself changed that at the very last minute, waving me forward with red-rimmed eyes in front of both families gathered in that converted barn. Richard walked her down the aisle, as originally planned, because by that point, changing it again would have caused more damage than it repaired. And honestly, by then, I didn't need to be the one holding her arm to know exactly what I had built over 18 years, brick by brick, on my own. I did eventually resume the loan payments, but not the same way. 2 weeks after the honeymoon, Emily and I sat down together and restructured the whole thing out loud, as 2 adults, with her name legally added, and a real plan to split what remained between us. Not because anyone shamed me into it, but because once the truth was finally spoken instead of quietly carried alone in the dark, It stopped feeling like an invoice and started feeling like what it always should have been, a choice we both understood and agreed to, together. Richard, to his credit, apologized to me directly not long after. He admitted he hadn't thought through what his offhand suggestion at that dinner table might actually cost. He admitted he hadn't known about the loan either. And he said something I genuinely didn't expect from him, that he'd like to earn a place at the table too, instead of assuming one was simply owed to him. It's been 8 months now. I don't carry the whole weight silently anymore, and I don't sit at the edge of family photographs anymore either. Last month, at Emily's birthday dinner, she asked me, not Richard, to give the toast, and I did, and my voice only shook a little near the end. I still travel every year now. Bea and I email each other regularly, planning our next overlap of dates somewhere warm. The account I use to quietly call my rainy day fund, I've renamed Simply Mine. If you've ever been the one quietly paying for a seat nobody ever actually promised to save for you, maybe it's time you did the arithmetic too. Some things you give freely because you love someone. Other things you've just been invoicing yourself for out of habit, for so long you forgot there was ever a difference. Learning to tell the two apart, that's the whole trick of it.